an opportunity to provide input. For those that are just joining us, thank you for joining the conversation on civil rights discussion and compliance reviews. And I'm going over the overview or the administrative notes at this point. So first of all, we're scheduled to talk for about an hour and 45 minutes. The first hour or so will be more lecture-based. We'll be giving you cognitive information with regard to civil rights compliance reviews and the requirements inherent to those compliance reviews that you receive to ensure that civil rights laws are being adhered and that your agency doesn't run into risk of being found or liable for violations of civil rights. Our job is to make you successful. I see myself as a partner in making sure that there are no findings of discrimination. That's our goal. So if you need some help along the way, please do not hesitate to call us and say, hey, I got a question. We're always there to assist you. So I'll start the training by doing some introductions. And so I'll introduce my team members. As I said earlier, I'll start with Dolores, who will tell you a little bit about herself. Go ahead, Dolores.
You're on mute, Dolores.
Good morning, I'm Dolores Taylor, and I'm an Equal Opportunity Specialist with the Office of Civil Rights, and I've been with FAS for 24 years, and I've conducted compliance review 23 of those years. I see a lot of names, so I know a lot of people on here, but there are a lot of names that I do not recognize. It's a pleasure to be here again, and I hope to see you all soon. I turn it over to Nadine Gurry.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nadine Gurry. I'm an EEOC specialist in the Office of Civil Rights for FAS. I'm glad that you all were able to attend this virtual USAEDC workshop this year. I've met or spoke with some of you all in the past 3 years, and if I haven't, I will meet with you in the future. I'll be glad to, get to know you all. I hope you enjoy and get something out of the training today. And from there, I'm going to pass that on to my co-partner, Frances Vaughn.
You're on mute, Vaughn.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Frances. Oh, no.
You there?
It went out. Okay, I can't see you all. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Frances Vaughn. I am an EO and an EEO specialist in the Office of Civil Rights with FAS. And I am excited to be the newest member of the compliance team. I've met some of you, and I look forward to meeting the rest of you. I hope you enjoy and get something out of this meeting today. And I will turn over to Angela Williams.
Good morning. My name is Angela Williams. I'm USDA Section 508 officer. And my responsibility is making sure all information and communication technology is accessible to individuals with disabilities. I will be doing a presentation on making Word documents 508 compliant. And I don't know many of you, hope to get to work with a lot of you. And with that being said, I'll turn this over to Adriana.
Thank you all. And on that note, Angela's going to be doing some showing you how to make your websites or Word documents 508 compliant. It's a very frequent question that we get with regard to accessibility to documents. So that's why we brought her in, and we thank Angela for joining us. So what we're going to try to do is start with some case studies. These are case studies for illustrative purposes only, and they do not attribute any particular actions to any individual or agency. And during the course of the training, I'll describe and explain key components of the 1964 Civil Rights Act as it relates to Title VI, which is the program side. That's where, and Title VII, which is the employment side. And when Dolores and the team, Fran and Nadine go out there, they're looking at Title VI and Title VII. They're looking how is the administration of the civil rights operation in your particular organization being administered, and we're doing that to be in compliance with civil rights statutes under Title VI and Title VII. Angela, as I noted earlier, will show you how to make Word documents accessible, and it's just because it's a frequent question that we get a lot of time, and it's really a tool that we have available that many people don't know in order to make websites accessible, and they don't have to spend all this money. It's right in the platforms right now. We just want to make you aware of that. And if nothing else, let you go away with knowing that that tool is available and it doesn't require these expensive ways of making accessibility possible for individuals with disability. And again, administrative notes, I just want to reiterate, just raise your hands virtually on the platform. We'll acknowledge you and we'll entertain your questions. Once you've done that, put your hands down. As I go through the training, you may have some questions in there and we'll ask for participation when we do the discussion on the cases. Towards the end, we will also have an opportunity for you to ask additional questions. A lot of times you don't know you have a question until you go through the training itself. So just bear with me as we get ready to move on forward. So we'll start out with the case studies, but before I do that, I want to make sure I don't have any questions so far. I don't see any hands.
Adriano.
Yes.
This is Rebecca. I'm just going to interject here for a second. Some of you, depending on how you joined, I know some of you with your work computers can't join kind of the regular Zoom way. You may not have a raise hand option. If that's the case, just put it in the chat, type your question in the chat, and I'll be watching that as well.
Thank you, Rebecca. And then one other thing that from an administrative point, this session is being recorded just to ensure that we're able to provide USAEDC with this information moving forward, and it'll be a way to improve my training in the future. And I always look at ways to improve in training. That's always a good thing. So with that, if Rebecca has nothing else, I'll move forward. Okay, Rebecca, if we can go to the third slide. They were not seeing the overview. Next slide. Okay, so this is the first case that I want to talk about, and I'm going to read it to you. Please bear with me. I'm not trying to insult your intelligence. There's a lot to read here. Now I'm having a challenge here because as you present it, it blocks some of my my words here, Angela, so I can't see it. How do I move this out of the way? Let me see. Okay, there it is.
Click on
So,
it.
I figured it out. Jane works after school as a customer service representative. After a company dinner, one individual, her supervisor, offers to drive her home. During the car ride, her supervisor tells her that he thinks she is beautiful and asks her to have sex with him. Jane refuses. When she goes to work the next day, her supervisor pulls her aside and tells her to look at her new work schedule, close quote. When she does, Jane notices her name has been removed from the schedule for the next several weeks. So the first question I would have for participants is this harassment? Why or why not? And I can't see your hands, so I would ask Rebecca to help me with that. Any hands raised? No? No one wants to?
Raised, yep. If anybody wants to drop into the chat, and Adriano, if you click the participants list at the bottom.
Mm-hmm, there it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all 49. Okay, great.
Got a couple of people in the chat.
Well, seeing no one raising their hand.
Adriano, there's a lot of people that say they are answering, but I guess they're joining the chat. It's coming up on my screen. And
Yeah.
a lot of them are saying yes. I don't know if you can see that or not.
I cannot. If you could just read it for me, Dolores, that would be helpful. What are they saying?
Chris, hold on.
Yeah, so I see a lot of you.
Christian says yes. Tammy Kessler says harassment.
Mm-hmm.
Ed Bierman said clearly harassment in my view. Gina Puri says yes.
Okay.
I may be getting these names messed up. Miss Hanson, yes. Gordon, yes.
So Dolores, I got it. So it looks like mostly everyone has said yes, and of course that is the right answer. That is a type of harassment. For those that don't know, it's sexual harassment because it's unwelcome, request for sexual favors in exchange, quid pro quo for something of value. I would also note there that although it's not implicit in the statement, there is also an element that could come up of retaliation because the schedule was changed, and if the person was then subsequently removed from the position, there will also be a basis for retaliation. So sexual harassment, which is a type of discrimination under sex, would be the type of harassment. Another thing that I would note when you talk about harassment, it's based on severe and pervasiveness, right? So the person asking someone to engage in some activity at work that is not appropriate, such as having sex with him, is clearly engaging in sexual harassment. And so if that went to EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, that probably would not be a good situation for the agency or the company. I'll move on to the next one, just next slide, if you would. So this slide talks about, addresses another issue, and I'll read it to you. I'm not trying to insult you, but I just want to make sure everybody gets the same message. Charlie complains to his foreman about graffiti in the workplace that he believes is derogatory towards women. Charlie asks that the graffiti be removed because several women have told Charlie they are offended by it. The foreman tells Charlie to mind his own business. The next day, Charlie is fired for being a troublemaker. So obviously he's removed. What say you? Is this a type of harassment, or could this lead to a discrimination allegation? And I'll wait for your comments. Yeah, so I am seeing that everyone is basically coming back. Yes, it's clearly, and these examples are really clear examples. I don't want to leave no ambiguity to it. These are clear cases of either sexual harassment, or in this particular case, or gender discrimination. So if this is occurring any place, it's not the proper way to respond to someone who's bringing an issue to the leadership and saying, hey, look, we got this particular challenge or this particular issue in the workplace and we need to address it. And then I would ask the group, what would have been the proper response for this foreman to do here? What would have been if someone could just opine? It's okay to talk, folks. It's a lot easier. Just take yourself off mute, say your thoughts. Nobody? Any recommendations on what the supervisor should do? Maybe I'm not seeing it in the chat. Who's going to be the bold person, come out and be the first to speak?
I will. This is Caroline. I think the supervisor should remove the graffiti.
Okay, that's a good answer. So he should take steps, if I understand correctly, to get that graffitied out and probably have some conversations about what's appropriate in the workplace with the workforce, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyone disagree with that? Has a different perspective? Okay, seeing none, I'll go to the next example. If we can move to the next slide, Rebecca. So this one is a different type. This is more along the Title VI, which is mostly the focus that our team will be focusing on when they go on the Title VI programmatic, although they also look at employment. So this is a long one. I'm going to ask you to make a selection. Notice that it says select all that applies, so more than one answer may be correct. So Hale County received funds from USDA to work with rural businesses. Hale County placed notices in the local newspaper, which are primarily available to white residents from the community. The notice informs the county residents of the new economic program. 20% of the population of Hale County is African American. There is an African American owned newspaper that is read by the African American community. Hale County is also the site of the state facility that provides services for state residents with visual problems. And then there are the choices. Any observations? So I see something in here. Any observations? So I see someone has said A and B. One said go with A. Okay, okay, so it looks like most of you are hitting it right on target. So let me give you what the, if you could go over to the next slide, Rebecca. And then we'll discuss it a little bit. So as you can see, it's both A and B with regard to this question. First of all, Hale County must ensure that all notices of the new program are provided in publications that service the entire county. In addition, county officials must ensure that all notices are provided in an alternative format for individuals with disability. So yes, one of the things that you have to look at is if you're advertising a particular USDA program, you have to make it accessible to all possible users of that service. So that's why A and B is correct. And then we could go to the next slide, please. In this example, we're talking about accommodation for a deaf person. Some people use hearing impaired, so word selection sometimes is appropriate. For this example, and as I noted earlier, these are just for illustrative purposes and are not meant to be indicative of anyone having taken these actions in the past. So Sarah Smith, a participant in a USDA conducted program, is deaf. Sarah is required to meet with a USDA representative, Dave Jones. A USDA representative knows of Ms. Smith's disability and brings paper and pencil to the meeting so that he can exchange notes with Ms. Smith. When Ms. Smith arrives, she asks why no sign language interpreter is present. Mr. Jones explains that although Ms. Smith requested a sign language interpreter at the time the meeting was arranged, due to his busy schedule, he was not able to arrange for one. However, he is willing to spend as much time as needed to communicate by exchanging written notes. Ms. Smith refuses to continue the meeting under these circumstances and asks that the meeting be rescheduled for another time when a sign language interpreter can be present. I see. So first of all, what are the observations here that anyone would like to make? I see someone has submitted B as the answer, but what other observations can you make out of this? And I would ask for someone just to submit their input. So some say B and C, some say A. Anybody else? Anyone want to take a chance and answer the question verbally? No? Okay.
Hi, this is.
Hi, should he have let her know since she requested the interpreter at the time the meeting was arranged, should he have let her know that wasn't going to be possible so she was aware?
Yeah, so I'm hearing the question I think it's from Heather. Heather, if I'm getting it correct, I'm hearing that the question is, should he have told her before he got there, correct?
Yes, since she did request one at the time the meeting was arranged. Mm-hmm.
And he knew that she had a disability. I mean, in the example, it says he already knew about that disability and the fact that she would require an interpreter. So I think your point is one good step. At least he should have rescheduled the meeting if he was not going to be able to provide an interpreter. And if you go to the next slide, you will see that the correct response to that is in fact B. Mr. Jones, as a representative of USDA and under the requirements of the Rehab Act of 1973, should have provided Ms. Smith with a sign language interpreter. She shouldn't have to write her notes. It's just something that we talk about consideration of others. He should have taken that into consideration and made sure that he was going to have an interpreter there. And if he wasn't, he should at least said to her beforehand in enough time that he was going to need additional time to get an interpreter to facilitate the meeting. So Heather, that's a good comment. Any other thoughts? Hearing none, we'll move over to anybody else? No? Yes, and I agree with Eric's comment there. the being too busy is not an excuse, and the failure to plan accordingly is not going to, excuse the fact that the person just didn't have an interpreter. I mean, it's a meeting. He should have known, and in particular, since he is from USDA, this is something we talk about all the time, no matter where in USDA. Civil rights is a big focus. Do the right thing, as Secretary Perdue talks about, feed everyone and do the right thing, sort of. And one of the things of doing the right thing is making sure that you take into considerations some of the needs of the population that you're serving. So obviously he didn't do that in this example. And I think this is my last example, maybe one more. Beth works, let me get this up here. And this is pretty long. Beth works for USDA, and this is addressing complaints of discrimination. She works at Forest Service and provides civil rights related services. She answers written, telephonic, and online inquiries. One day, a telephone caller asked several questions about the complaint process and how to file a complaint against the Park Service for unlawful discrimination. Beth advised the caller to put her complaint in writing and send it to the USDA address, which she provided, and that USDA would investigate her complaint of discrimination. Giving, and I just highlight on number 18, I just put that there so you could see that the Injustice for and the EEO law actually tells you how to file the complaint, but people still may have questions. So the question is, did Beth address that correctly? Anybody? Someone's talking, go ahead. So Heather says it's B and C, okay. So no, Beth should have tried to answer the caller's questions first. And if she did not have the answer, she then should have directed caller to put the inquiry in writing. And then C, no, Beth should have a general knowledge of the complaint process. If we go to the next slide. And as you can see, it's C. No, the Park Service is not part of the USDA. Beth should have informed the caller that USDA did not have jurisdiction to investigate the complaint and referred the complaint to the Department of the Interior Office of Civil Rights. And the reason that's a very important, it sounds minute, but it's very important. The longer it takes for that complaint to get to its right area of redress, in other words, in this case, Department of Interior, the longer that person is going to be denied an opportunity to address our concerns. And also with civil rights, generally there are strict timelines under procedure due process by which the individual has to get that complaint in. And if they fall out of that requirement of meeting the timeline, then they may not be able to get that issue processed because it might be dismissed or it might be outside the statute of limitation if one is applicable. I'm not saying it always will apply, but if one is applicable. So that's why it's important that we give very correct information to individuals when they reach out to our office. If we could go to the next slide. And so before I go to this, I want to give anybody an opportunity or everyone an opportunity to provide additional input on the case studies or any particular observations that they have with regard to the case studies. None? But yeah, a quiet group. Usually I can't keep it. People want to say some more stuff, but that's okay. I'll keep talking. So I want to now go over and give you an overview of the titles of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Now, there are actually more than a few titles. There's more than just Title VI and Title VII. There's Title I, Title II. I think there's up to 10 or 12 titles in there. For our particular conversation at this particular junction, we're going to limit our conversation to Title VI and Title VII. And so as you see, Title VI says that no person in the United States shall, on the ground of race, color, or national origin, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. So anytime federal funds are used, those funds cannot be used in a manner which is discriminatory on the basis of a person's race, color, national origin. They can't be excluded. And the particular USC code that addresses that is right there, 42 USC. Under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which is usually more on, Title VII is more on the employment side. And this is a requirement for each agency to execute their employment procedures in accordance with the rules that they've outlined through the human resource or human capital, whatever the case may be. So Title VII says basically that you cannot discriminate against someone based on the race, religion, national origin, gender, mental, physical disability, GINA, which is genetic information, or retaliate against someone in either a job, getting a job, a promotion, or discharging the individual because of that person's protected basis, which I noted was either race, religion, national origin, gender, mental, or physical disability. Then there's the American with Disabilities Act, which is a lot of times when you look at why we're talking about website accessibility, and we're talking about making accommodation. If you go back to the early example where the individual brought a notepad instead of having some sign language interpreters available, these laws, or the American Disability Act or the Reasonable Accommodation Act of 2008, ADAA is what a lot of people know it as. These are requirements that say, as an employer, generally with 15 or more employees, you have to make sure that whatever services you provide are provided without discriminating on those bases. Age is another basis that is often overlooked. Generally, as anyone who's covered is 40 or older, but sometimes you can have, to have a prima facie, to have standing, you generally have to be 40 years of age or older. And the Supreme Court decided this a long time ago. And I think if you think back to the time when Ford Motor Company and a lot of the jobs were in Detroit, Michigan with the Ford, a lot of folks, they would work in these organizations for a long time, and then they would be let go. And because they were older in age, it was harder for them at the time to get jobs because they would be up in age. Now, the Supreme Court had a limit on that as well. It used to be there was a limit of, so the bare minimum was 40. In other words, once you were 40, you became protected. And then once you reached 70 years of age, then you could remove without a BFOQ, bona fide occupational qualification. The Supreme Court went back and said, no, you can work until you decide to retire, unless there is a bona fide occupational qualification. If you think about a police officer or an airline, a pilot, they may have foreign service specifically for FAS, they have to retire by the age of 65. And that's because there's a public policy that's being affected once you get beyond those ages, or the courts have determined that the ability to perform at the higher level deteriorates after that age. Just think about an airplane pilot at certain ages. Now, the upper limit is no longer in effect. Next slide, please. And I want to pause here before I go into the sexual harassment conversation and see if there are any questions from the group. Let me clear these just to make sure. Nope, I don't see anything coming through, so I'll keep going. Okay, what happened? Lost the... Okay, the next one I'm going to talk about is, in addition to race, religion, there's also the prohibition against sex discrimination. Sometimes people get confused between sex and gender. They're kind of the same. They lead to the same meaning, but when we talk about Equal Pay Act, the 1963 Equal Pay Act, and then it's amended with the Lilly Ledbetter Act, what basically it says is that you have to pay men and women substantially equal pay, or equal pay for substantially equal work in the same establishment. And so that is a gender, so we use gender to designate that particular act, the Equal Pay Act of 63. And then for sexual harassment, as I noted earlier, it has to be unwelcome sexual advances. Sometimes it gets a little complicated because, you know, you could have an organization where people start out as friends, then somebody becomes a supervisor, and then, you know, they still have the relationship, or the relationship breaks, and then one wants to break the relationship and one wants to continue the relationship. But if the important thing is that if it's unwelcome at any time, it could fall within that category of unlawful harassment based on sex. And I'll just point out, harassment does not have to be of a sexual nature, however, and can include offensive remarks about a person's sex. And that bullet, what I want to highlight for you is there are different types of harassment. There's race harassment, or harassment based on race. There's harassment based on age. There's harassment based on disability. This is another one of those elements of harassment. So if it's a protected basis, then it's usually a prohibition to harass an individual because of that particular protected basis. Both victim and harasser can be either a woman or a man, and the victim harasser can be of the same sex. You may be aware that in particular this year there was a Supreme Court decision where they determined the sexual orientation falls within the criteria of sex discrimination. I heard somebody wanted to put in there a pause. Anyone? Okay. And then I want to highlight this bullet here, because a lot of people get confused on this, but this is right out of EEOC. Although Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, although the law doesn't prohibit simple teasing, offhand comments, or isolated incidents, they are not very serious. You know, then you get what's serious. All right, so it depends on the person, right, from the person who's receiving it. Harassment is illegal when it is so frequent or severe. And I underline those two points there, because if it's frequent or severe, you know, sometimes if somebody touches someone in an erogenous area, that might actually rise to the level of criminal activity and may also be assault. But what they're saying is, with the use of words and innuendos, if that happens over and over, that frequency may make it an element of harassment. And when you look at the frequency element, just think about, you know, one of those sand clocks where you kind of let the sand go down. It starts with one particular grain of sand, and eventually it becomes a molehill or a mountain. So the issue is if it's something that is repeated. For example, in the first example, the young student said, or the young lady said to the individual, no. I mean, that was brazen. But let's say he just asked for a date and the person said no, and then was asked again and again and again. So at some point that becomes a little bit too frequent, and it may raise to the level of harassment, whether it be sex or whatever the basis is. Any questions on that? No? And then finally, this is kind of important. The harasser can be the victim's supervisor, a supervisor in another area, a co-worker, or someone who is not an employee of the employer. Sometimes you have this, or a customer. Sometimes because FAS is an international trade agency, sometimes we have interactions with people after work as they get together, and it's still in those cases, some folks may say, well, we're not at work, but you got to be careful not to do something called an extension of the workplace. If it's an extension of the workplace, that could also result in some liability to the agency. And I just put that out there for you to know. If we could go to the next slide, if I have no other questions. Okay, I was hoping to get some more questions, but I can't really see any participation. Let me see, make sure I haven't got anything coming in. Okay, I will continue. Other bases that you have to think about, again, all I'm trying to do is give you the information that you need so you can correlate when my folks come to your agency and ask, or your company and ask questions like, okay, is the poster up? You know, why was this person discharged? Or when some people talk to us, so that you can understand that there may be just other elements that fall under the Civil Rights Act, either 6 or 7, which may be appropriate for discussion. So national origin discrimination means treating someone less favorably because he or she comes from a particular place, because of his or her ethnicity or accent, or because it is believed that he or she has a particular ethnic background. National origin discrimination also means treating someone less favorably at work because of marriage or other association with someone of a particular nationality. And, you know, just like all the other prohibitions that you can't make hiring decisions and firing decisions, promotion decisions based on those national origin. Basically, if you have a business-based reason for making a decision that is absent of a Title VI or Title VII protected basis, then that's a business base. But if you're making that decision because of national origin, then that may be problematic for the agency. Also, whether you're talking about national origin, whether you're talking about sex or sexual harassment or race discrimination, all those have an implied retaliation protection clause. In other words, because they brought that action to you, some action, adverse action was taken, as in the case with the graffiti, where the person brought the graffiti to the foreman's attention. Instead of taking the action of saying, thank you for bringing that to my attention, I'll go ahead and get that graffiti out. I'll go ahead and provide training to individuals within the workplace that we will not tolerate any form of, you know, disparaging remarks or so forth, whether they be on race or sex or whatever the basis is. They actually took action to affect that person's conditions of employment. So all the bases have a retaliation. In the Title VI side, there's still that retaliation part, but there's a different procedure than under the Title VII. We're going to give you more information on that down the road. Just know that regardless of whether you're talking about Title VI or Title VII, it's prohibited to retaliate against someone because they make a protected communication. So now we get to the meat and potatoes. What is the purpose of a compliance review, and what does it really do? Really is an opportunity, as you know, some of the funds that the USDA provides to agencies is an opportunity to conduct a regular review and evaluate the equal opportunity policies and procedures of a given organization. And that's to ensure that any funds that are provided to the agency to carry out the mission, as most of you do, to increase agricultural exports around the world, that those funds are being used free of discriminatory intent. Next slide. And then here are some tools for achieving civil rights compliance. So I put this here, and I think after the training, you'll get this website that's there that's going to provide you with all these modules of training, which will give you an introduction to civil rights. It'll talk you through, and it's soft skills, so it's an interactive platform on equal employment opportunity. It'll talk to you about cultural diversity. Now, I know there is an executive order out there that talks about the prohibition against certain type of training that rely on race theory, basically that one race is superior or inferior or something like that. In any of the training that USDA has, none of that is put forward. None of the trainings that USDA has goes astray of the executive order. So generally what you want to make sure is that any training that you do is properly vetted. If you use the training from USDA, they're required to vet, or we are required to vet that training to ensure compliance with the executive order that's out there. You also have training on sexual harassment before it starts, diversity in the workplace. You know, one of the things that I always say is, if you're making your decision, your employment decision, just because they're the best candidate overall that you interview, overall, that's going to show that you're going to have a pretty diverse environment where, in other words, it's going to be reflective of the nation's population. you should also be aware that sometimes there's something called, when you're looking at discrimination laws, that you have to also consider where it's at, where the employment opportunities take place. For example, if I'm only recruiting in Texas, certain parts of Texas, Houston, Dallas, I might get one particular population as opposed to if I was recruiting in DC. So you have to take into consideration the relative qualifying workforce. If you recruit nationally, then, and which is the preferred way, then your workforce should really reflect the population of the nation. And so that website that I think Rebecca is going to provide to you afterwards will allow you to access all that training. And I'll pause to see if there are any questions or if any of my team members want to add some input at this particular time. They're okay? Hearing none, I'll move on. Can we go to the next slide, Rebecca? Okay, so this one I'm going to ask my expert. You know, Dolores talked about, she really is a big subject matter expert in the office. She's been doing these compliance reviews quite a long time. And I'm happy to say, as long as I've been here and as long as she's been here, I have not heard of a finding of discrimination with regard to Title VI for any of the agencies. So that speaks to how well they're doing that particular job. So Dolores, take it away.
Okay, Adriana. Hello, everybody. First, I want to go back to your last slide. I want to make sure the organizations know that when the trainee completes the training, they need to complete the affirmation of confirmation form and keep it on file so that when we come on and do a compliance review, they will have that file accessible for us. Now, going on to the communication resource plan is a tool that the organization use to list those resources they can turn to when maybe they need a sign language interpreter. They need someone to help them with someone with hearing impaired, visual accessibility. Facility accessibility is stating that when you deliver a USDA program, that program must be delivered in a facility that is accessible. We're not saying that the entire building must be accessible, but the program itself. There are individuals with temporary disabilities you may not know. For example, if you have if you're implementing a program on a 3rd floor and you don't have elevators and you have steps, and I as a participant broke my leg, but I want to participate in the program, we're just asking that you relocate the room so that I, as a participant, will be able to have access to that program as well. Some people, when they have offices that is not accessible, they may have contract, like one of the corporators, their building is not accessible and they're in what they call a historical something, they can't make any changes to it. So what they've done is they have a contract with the hotel across the street. So if they have a meeting or anything, they'll have access to a room over there. The limited English proficiency plan, at this time, we don't require our recipients to actually conduct a plan, but a resource is included in your communication plan that will allow you to be able to translate documents into a language other than English. I think that's it, Adriana. I think I touched on all of them.
All right, Dolores, thank you. And I just add to what Dolores says. So some things are common sense. You know, in a different organization prior to me coming here, for example, on the facility accessibility, you gotta be cognizant of that. For example, if you have someone who is in a wheelchair, do you have a fire evacuation system? Are they on the 3rd floor in the building? Do you have elevators on there? You gotta make those kind of things known, exactly the ramps as well. Make sure that you have the ramp that meets that. So some of these things that you see here are really common sense. You know, we've come to an era in technological improvements that, you know, you can either move the person to the 1st floor so they don't have to come no flight of stairs, or you can use other mechanisms, but you do have to think about these things when you have individuals who may have additional needs. And sometimes, as Dolores said, you may not know that there are some other needs, but some are clearly known, and you should take action to ensure that everybody has equal access and an equal opportunity to achieve their fullest potential. Next slide. All right, so this one, Dolores already talked about the limited English proficiency plan as it relates to the communication resource plan. She noted that you're not required to do a limited English proficiency plan, but I draw your attention to the future state there. So sometime in the near future, when the department comes up with a formalized plan, you will need to look at that. So I'm kind of giving you head warning in advance, or pre-operation orders, I would say, that this is probably going to come sometime in the future. I don't know if it's within the next year or two, but just know that it's coming. And one of the things that they're going to focus on, as you see there, is the 4-factor analysis, identifying limited English proficiency persons eligible to be served or likely to be encountered by the program or recipient, the frequency with which LEP individuals come in contact with the program. And that goes back to what I said earlier about the qualifying workforce. It depends where you are. In some areas, you might have more individuals who may need, who have limited English and therefore may need more translations or languages translated. So just keep that in mind, that these are the 4 steps that you kind of have to take into account. When this becomes formalized, we'll obviously let you know that it has been formalized, and we will work with you to try to make sure that your plan meets the requirements set by the department. And just know that the department, before they publish that out, they want to make sure that we have, that our plan is acceptable as well. So that'll be coming in the future. If we go to the next slide. So these are just requirements of the non-discrimination statement. I think Dolores talked about when she goes out there and does herself and Nadine and Fran, and they do the compliance reviews. One of the things that they do is to make sure that the non-discrimination statement is in correspondence, that the posters are presented in a location where it's frequented, where people have access to view the poster. And they'll ask people, do you know what the poster, do you know where it's at? And so it'd be helpful for folks to know where those posters are to ensure or maximize your opportunity to comply and have no findings. I just want to say that our folks, when they go there, and I know because I've talked to Dolores, our goal is to help you be in compliance. So if it's something that you can do right away to fix it, I'm sure she's going to give you that opportunity to do it at that time. But some things like memorandums and flyers, you just got to make sure that whenever you use a USDA or FAS name and a logo, that you either have, one of the acceptable forms of non-discrimination statements. You may use your own non-discrimination statement as long as it does not contradict the federal government statement. Next slide, please. Here's an example. I'm not going to read this all to you. This is just an example of a long statement. As you can see, there's a lot of information on the page. And towards the bottom, USDA is an equal opportunity provider, employer, and lender. And it talks about the Civil Rights Office and USDA. Dolores, you want to add anything before I move to the short statement?
I apologize on me. No.
Okay, thank you. So the next one is, next slide is, this is an example of a short statement. This institution is an equal opportunity employer and provider. And again, it goes back to the slide where I talked about when you use logos or USDA programs, you have to put this. I mean, pretty much this is getting around people understand that you have to say that you are an equal opportunity employer and provider. And then you have to do more than just say, you have to show that that's what you're doing. Anytime you get an allegation of discrimination, whether it's on the program side or on the employment side, the first thing they're going to ask you is, what is your policy on employment, or what is your policy with regard to how you distribute the funds. And this is a good way to say, yeah, we're an equal opportunity employer and provider. And see, our letterhead says this, our flyers say this, and our bulletin board says it, the posters post it. So we support these elements. Next slide, please.
Wait a minute, John, I need to say something about this one.
Okay, go ahead.
It doesn't matter what platform you use. If you're displaying information regarding FAS or USDA, you must put this statement somewhere in the beginning, at the end. Say it, depending on if you have a video, it must be somewhere provided.
Yeah, it must be provided, whether it's a long or short. But basically, if you're using the USDA letterhead or logo, you have to provide. I think that's the point. And I'll let Dolores speak to this point on the recipient. Go ahead, Dolores.
This non-discrimination statement is what you see on the Injustice for All poster. It has the base, if you notice, it has the bases that apply to recipients receiving funds from from the USDA. It's different from USDA non-discrimination basis because depending on the program, different programs have different regulations, and depending on the program, someone may not be able to file a complaint on a certain basis. But this is the information from the Injustice for All poster.
Yeah, and you notice that even at the bottom, it has equal opportunity providers. So this is for recipients, as Dolores said. Next slide, please. And here's the Justice for All poster. Let me see how to raise your hand. Click participation. Okay, so just. Are there any hands raised, Rebecca? I can't really see.
No, I just wanted to make sure everybody knew how to do it. Sorry.
Okay, thanks. As Laura says, the Injustice for and Justice for All poster is the primary method of informing customers of their rights under the civil rights statutes. In other words, it informs them of the procedures of how to file a USDA program discrimination complaint. It's a process that's required, which is supposed to inform them. One of the things that you have to do to comply with civil rights is make people aware. Some in the federal government call it no fear training. You got to make them aware of what their rights and responsibilities are with regard to civil rights. And yes, I'll speak to the question, does FAST provide these posters in a minute, Jessica? So there's another part about Injustice for All poster. It has to be a specific size. As you can see in front of you, it's got to be 11 by 17 height, 11 in width, and 11 inches in width and 17 inches in height. And then just as a note, this poster replaces the original poster, which used to be the Statue of Liberty. And so the Statue of Liberty poster, you can continue to have that poster displayed until we provide you with the new poster in the near future. So USDA, to the previous question, FAS, we will make sure those posters are available to you. And I'll let Dolores add any other points that she wants to highlight in this particular part.
Just make sure when you're displaying this posters in a location where everyone has access to it. Mainly we ask you to put in your main reception area, because if a customer come in it, we want them to be able to go to that poster, get the information off of it, and not have to interact with someone if possible.
And yeah, sometimes I would just say, sometimes people forget, that they see the poster. Sometimes you put it right in the entrance to the building, and then when we ask them, they don't remember. But I would have more than one or two posters, and also you might have to make sure that you have it available in, in other formats, online, and so forth. Next slide, please.
In other language if necessary.
Yes. And then the next one is the EEO Equal Employment Opportunity. It's the law poster. And this poster, similar to the Injustice for All poster, has to be displayed in any place where people congregate, break areas. It should be in a place where people can see it and know and understand. Bulletin boards. What the goal here is just to advise people that these are their rights. And think about it this way. all these procedures have timelines associated, whether it's on the Title VII side or on the Title VI. Procedure due process says if they were aware of that, why didn't they file that allegation in a timely manner? So this is a way to protect both the individual who is alleging the harassment or discrimination and the agency, because the agency have to provide them due notice. So that's what we're trying to say. That's really ultimately the purpose of whether you're talking about the EEOC poster, it's the law, or and Justice for All posters. It's really to make people aware of what their rights and responsibilities are. Lois, want to add something?
Yes, I just want to make note that sometimes when we coming on board, we want to make note that and Justice for All poster deals with USDA programs. EEO, the Equal Employment Opportunity Law, deals with employment. Two different aspects. A lot of the recipient employees get them mixed up. So that's why I just want to say that USDA and Justice for All programs. EEO is the law, employment.
Thank you, Dolores. So, I mean, that's a good point that she makes there that I would just emphasize. One is with regard to the federal financial aid or the programs that USDA runs, and one is with regard to employment of the organization. That really is overseen in general by EEOC. There's also something called the Office of Contract Compliance Program, which is under DOL, which deals with contractors. But for our purposes right now, just keep in mind that these posters are really to protect the organization and the individuals, to protect them from either harassment or discrimination, and to make sure that the organization complies with its affirmative requirement to inform people. That's basically it. Next slide, please. So this is an example of a meeting statement. And as you notice, again, it focuses on with regard to race, color, national origin, sex, age, religion, or disability. And it talks about the reasonable accommodation procedures and alternate means, such as Braille, large print. And this is required to be in all meeting rooms. But there's also a best practice, and I'll let Dolores talk about what's the best practice when she talks about, when organizations put that out. Go ahead, Dolores.
No, this is the statement that when you announce your meetings, notices announcement, this must go on to allow participants to be able to know whom they can contact in case they need to request a reasonable accommodation or alternative means of communication. What is a new statement, a part of this is language translation. We want to make sure that those people who may not be able to understand or speak English proficiently also have the opportunity to request maybe your information or documents in a language other than English. So when we coming on board, it's not that you are not compliant with this requirement, just that we're asking you to add the language translation to it. And when we coming on board, what we see is people will also have the persons who require alternative means, but not the reasonable accommodation. The reasonable accommodation is only needed for meetings. When you're inviting someone to participate in a meeting, that's when you need to add the reasonable accommodation to your alternative means statement. But the alternative means statement is for your publications. Is that clear? Did I scramble that up, y'all?
Yeah, so thank you, Dolores. I think it's clear. The point that I was trying to emphasize, the point that came out through our earlier discussion, is that you don't want to do this last minute. You should have something where when you start talking about your strategically what the training you're going to do in the organization, what the meetings you're going to have. So you want to give as much lead time to get this out. You shouldn't just take it down and say, okay, tomorrow I'm going to have a meeting. And as we talked earlier, you may have to go through other avenues to have maybe a shared conference room. So a best practice may be to just have this clearly stated early on, not just the day of or the 30 minutes prior. That's the point we're making. The points that Dolores made are absolutely correct. Make sure that this is available. It's just another way of informing people that you are an equal opportunity employer and provider. That's just basically what it is. Next slide, please. So on this one, what I did was I just kind of try to explain in this slide. I couldn't possibly explain in an hour or less all the things that take place in the compliance review. But at least by having Dolores, Nadine, and Fran here, you're able to see what they're checking for, why their questions have relevance, what have you seen the poster? Do you know how to file a programmatic complaint? Do you know your agency employment policy? So basically, the process that they use to start the compliance, it's not something where we just say to you, we're going to come up there and see you tomorrow. No, it doesn't happen like that. So first, we make a schedule determination at our office to determine, when is the best time to go out there and do these compliance reviews, and what particular factors are we having to consider. Just take note, right now we're all operating virtually, so we did a lot of, previously we went on site, but now we're transitioning as best we can to the virtual, whether telephonically or virtual type of assessment. Now, we may have to look at that down the road, because we do have to, yes, and to your question, Jessica, we try to audit everyone at least once every 3 years. That's a goal rather than a quota. So that's why we have to set the schedule. And then we also have to coordinate that schedule with the department. And so once we determine the schedule, we send it out to the department. We say, hey, these are the schedules we're going to, how we're going to do the compliance reviews for this year. So one of the things that our team, and mostly Nadine and Dolores or Fran, will reach out to you, check for your availability. And then they're going to say, when are you available? They're going to propose. It'll be back and forth. No, I can't do it this way. I have this is a very busy season. How about this time? So then with a conversation between the cooperators and the stakeholders, then when the data is set, based on the availability of all parties. And then once those dates have been determined, we'll go out there, there'll be interviews conducted. The interviews generally last about 40, what I've been told is they last about 45 minutes to an hour. And the company determines who will participate in there. Of course, when it gets back, we'll look at that a little bit, but generally we'll say, okay, give us the folks that are going to participate. And we want a representative sample, if you will. And then one of the things that I do want to make sure is that leadership, senior leaders must be interviewed. We have to really get their points of view. We have to know what their intent, what their policies are. So they will interview the senior leaders. I want to keep moving, but I want to give Dolores an opportunity to add if she has anything else to add on this.
But I just want to go back to Jessica's story. In the future, we hadn't been able to get everybody every 3 years because it was only myself. But now that we have the staff to conduct this training, we should be able to get everyone within 3 to 4 years. So moving forward from now on, we should be able to conduct it every 3 to 4 years with the staff we have on board, unless that changes.
Yeah, and from a leadership, thank you, Dolores. From a leadership perspective, I will tell you that we are trying to increase capacity. Just a heads up, you have about, yeah, thank you. To increase capacity in this area. And so we're coming close to the end. If we could get the next slide. And so I won't speak too much on this slide, except to say, this is on the exit conference. So after our folks come out there and do the compliance review, they will have an exit conference to tell you, as it says, to discuss preliminary findings, to give you to find if there's additional information you want to submit or it needs to be looked at. Then they will at some point provide a written report to achieve compliance. So you get something in writing. I know that I get those reports and I sign them from Dolores at some point. And the goal here is to ensure that we have voluntary compliance within 60 days. And that's, next slide, please. I think we'll just move on because I got to get the other ones here. All right, so as we prepare to go to the final stretch of this conversation, I just want to talk a little bit about Section 508 of the Rehab Act, 504 and 508. One of the things that we saw a lot was people were having, you know, the documents were not 508 or 504 or 508 compliant. So the requirement under 504 under the Rehab Act says no qualified individual with a disability in the United States shall solely by reason of his or her disability be excluded from the participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial funds. That's really clear on that. So that's why we're providing this training. Angela Williams was kind enough to come and help us show you how to make some of your documents, and particularly Word documents, accessible to comply, to ensure accessibility and compliance. And I turn it over to you, Angela.
Okay, thank you. Let me get here.
What I'm saying, the videos.
The videos. Okay, so thank you for allowing me to come. One of the things that I want to do is to demonstrate how to make, you know, Microsoft Office Suite best practices, how to make your Word document 508 compliant. Word document is one of the widely used authoring tools to disseminate information. And if you can start right here, making your documents 508 compliant, you can make them accessible to individuals with disabilities. So I want to start off with letting you know that this is your ribbon. Everything in your ribbon is set up there for a purpose when it comes to accessibility. Whatever you need to do to create your document, make sure you create it from the ribbon. That is so important that you create it from the ribbon. And I'll explain to you later why. So the first thing you want to do from your ribbon is your fonts. You want to make sure that you're using system fonts from the ribbon where they are 12 font or greater. Assistive technology does not read font less than 12 because it's very small and it has a difficult time distinguishing between letters. So we want to make sure that when we're selecting fonts that we use sans serif, like Times Roman, Arial, those are acceptable fonts to use, where if assistive technology had to distinguish between letters, that they're able to do that accurately. So I was just demonstrating the difference between 12 font and 11 font, where here's in 12 font, you can see that each letter is seen, and assistive technology could designate what each letter represents. But if you use sans serif or sans scripts and things like that, assistive technology does not get to use the scribbly lines or able to read the scribbly lines. And if it's small, it's not able to determine the letters because they are pretty much pulled together to make those scripts. So color contrast, one of the things about color contrast that is so important when we use color contrast to enhance, make sure that we're not using color to be the only way that we convey information. So I use the stop sign scenario so that we all know that red, yellow, and green means something, but for an individual who is has low vision, who is blind, they're not able to see those. So you would put some type of writing or text with that so that they understand what it means, like red symbolizes stop, yellow symbolizes caution. You have to make sure that you are providing descriptions and information to individuals with disabilities so that they get the same information you would, whether they were blind, low vision, hard of hearing, deaf, and cognitive, short-term memory. So you want to make sure that you are providing that information and that they get a clear picture of what you're trying to say. So when it comes to colors, we want to make sure that you're not using color as the only way to convey that information, because people who are colorblind, they only see grays and sometimes purples and things like that, and they may not get to see what you're trying to say. One of the good ways to do it is that if you're using a word or whatever, say here it's red, we know that it's red, we may only see it gray, but we also conveyed it in a different way. So the word warning still stands out, even if we use red and a person is colorblind or short-term memory, because you've used a certain way and a sole means to convey information. This is very interactive. If you have a question, please do so. You want to make sure that your contrast is sufficient. The requirements is, and the rule of thumb is that if it hurts the eyes, then your contrast may not be great enough. The other contrast is if it's a light background, you want to use dark colors. If it's a dark background, you want to use light colors. This is demonstrated here where we have a light background and we use light colors. It's very hard to read. It's not very easy on the eye, so it makes it difficult for an individual to interpret what you're trying to say or get the full picture of what's being done here. Do not use reds and greens in your text. I'm not saying that you cannot use red or green. What I'm saying is do not let reds and greens overtake your page. What people don't understand is that red and greens have a flashing background, pixels to maintain that color, so that if you have like sensitivity to light or epilepsy, you can cause seizures if you use a lot of red and green, because that flickering in the background, a person that doesn't have a disability will not see it, but a person who does may see that and cause seizures by having that amount of colors that is contrast on your page. So make sure that when you use colors red and green, you use it sparingly, but you can use it. Does somebody have a question? I can't hear what you're trying to say. Okay, so do not use fluorescent colors that are very, very light. Fluorescent, they tend to trigger seizures for those who have light sensitive, who have epilepsy. As you can see, the reds and the greens, they're very bright, very vibrant. If you don't have that light sensitivity, you will not understand that in order to maintain red and this type of green, there is a flashing in the background. There's also what we have here. I have a website where you can, if you're in doubt about your color contrast, you can go out to the website and check your color contrast. So what happens here is you have a contrast checker. So in your foreground, you might use blue, but in your background, you have that light color. But if I go here and change my color in any kind of way, here, it'll tell me if I failed, if your contrast has failed to meet those colors that need to be accessible to individuals with disabilities. Even if I I can go here and I can make it pass, things like that. So you want to make sure that whatever colors that you are using at that particular time, that it is meeting the contrast checker requirements. Images are very important. So whenever you have an image, you want to make sure that you put that alternative text behind it. So in order to put alternative text behind an image, you want to make sure you click on it. You want to go here and you want to go to edit alt text. You want to make sure that you describe this picture so that you are conveying the message that you want the person to get. Don't just let it be. Sometimes when you insert a picture, you may insert it from your file or your folder and it may say see, use, or whatever. That is not 508 compliant or accessible. You need to make sure that a person who is low vision and is blind is getting the same information that you want them to convey with this picture. You also have an opportunity. So if the picture is just sitting there and it's just decorations, you can mark it as decorative. You can also have it generate your own description. I don't recommend this because it may not show what you're trying to say, but if it does, then that's fine. But if not, you want to make sure that you're not using generated descriptions for your products. Okay, and so that's how you put alternative text behind a picture. Complex tables. When you do complex tables, you want to make sure that you are explaining exactly what that complex table is. My recommendation when you have complex tables, flow charts, any kind of diagrams that require a lot of arrows, a lot of changing, a lot of flows, my recommendation is to make it an image and put alt text behind it. That is my recommendation. Again, you want to make sure that you go here and you put alt text behind it and you explain what you want that person to get from that picture. Not every picture has to be or has to follow every point of the flow chart. You just want to make sure that that person gets exactly what you're trying to say or what you're trying to convey with that particular picture. So for here, I just want to say that cost versus selling price has to do with caps, t-shirts, large, small, sports bags and drinks. I just want to tell you which one costs the most, which one has the better selling price. That's what you put in there, and then that's how they will be able to develop that picture. So it doesn't have to be a long drawn out verse of what you're trying to say. Just make sure you are very clear on what you want the person to get from that picture. The other thing you want to do when you have charts is you want to make sure that you put a insert caption, and you want to insert it above, and you can put in here your figure. I'm going to put cost versus selling. And it will show up here. What this does is allows a person to begin to set up the basis for what this image is going to do or what this image is going to explain. So anytime you have images or flow charts in progress, you always want to make sure that you put a caption up here so they can begin to prepare on how to develop the information. When you have group complex images, here's two images, they're different, and if they represent one picture, and if you have a whole bunch of pictures and you're trying to convey one idea, you want to make sure that you're able to group them. So what you want to do is you want to put that right there, hit control, and make sure that you have both of these lines like this, and then all you want to do is go here and you want to group them. Then after you group them, you want to go here and you want to then edit alt text and put whatever the alt text in here. And I'm just going to put announcement for right now to do that. So for that particular image, you just want to make sure that you are explaining exactly what this information is trying to convey to you. Now, ensure images are inserted in line with text. You want to always make sure that your images is inserted in line with text before you start to float them. By inserting it in line with text, you give a basis for the reasonable accommodation to give them a starting point. And then once you start moving your pictures around, the assistive technology is able to follow that. Just make sure that whatever you do, you want to left justify and then start moving your images, your text and everything around. So it allows assistive technology to start from a certain point and then use that information to hear to or get a visual place on what you're trying to say. Again, with formatting, you want to make sure too, if you're doing formatting, you want to make sure that you're determining whether there's a heading 1, a heading 2. It doesn't matter which one it is, but if you definitely outline what it is, and later on, it'll be useful to you if your pages start to grow. You want to make sure that you use clear design layout, left justified, then move it around, floating pictures in line with text, and then move your pictures around. Do not use all capital letters except in the case of acronyms. Capital letters tend to scream at an individual. So if you use all capital letters in your document, it starts to translate aggressively for screen readers. It elevates every single time it runs into capital letters, and it becomes, if it's a lot of it, it really gets aggressive as it reads on, because to them, that's what it means. You're screaming at them. All acronyms should be written out at the first time, and then you have the ICT, then you can use it in there. So information and communication technology should be written out the first time. Then when you use ICT, they know. It captures with a reasonable accommodation. The individual knows that it's an acronym. After you use it, they know where to look for it and how to go back and find out what it means. For hyphens, here I'm demonstrating do not end a compound word at the end of a sentence, because anything with a hyphen at the end of a sentence causes assistive technology to pause. So if you did not group this around, if it did not wrap around on the next line, just go ahead and wrap it around, because this little hyphen at the end of here tells assistive technology to pause. And so it has nowhere to know where to go from there. It'll stop reading, it'll stop functioning, and then the person will believe that they're finished with the document, which is not true. So be very careful how you use compound words and how they end at the end of a sentence and not wrap around. Left justify all your text except for titles. My recommendation is to left justify your title and then move it to where you need it, because it gives a basis and a starting point for reasonable accommodation and assistive technology. That will work for you. Format your document using block style. Don't indent unless you're creating bullets. My recommendation is anything that you have to do with a document, whether it's bullets, whether it's numbering, whether it's indent, whether it's titles, make sure you use your ribbon, because that's what the accessibility up here is used for. It is designed to create your document in an accessible format. That's when creating bullets, you want to make sure you use your bullets up here. Titles, headers, I showed you how you format your headers, a header 1, a header 2. Create your headers and footers. Using your ribbon up here. Do not insert numbers here on your own. Do not put headers down there on your own. Assistive technology will not read it. It will not pick it up as numbers and formats. It will pick it up as blank spaces, and it will barely read the numbers if you put it down there. Use page number codes to paste within a document. Don't manually, again, put numbers at the bottom. Use hard page breaks. When you finish a sentence, when you have a document and you have extra enters and things like that, make sure you use a page break, because assistive technology reads every keyboard keystroke. So if you are in the middle of a page and you hit enter to go to the next page, assistive technology will read enter and go to the next page. That's the same thing with your space bar. If you use the space bar to indent, it will do space bar, and then start reading the text. So make sure you use your tab keys, make sure you're using all your functions on the keyboard, and make sure you're using your ribbon so that it becomes accessible and you have less keyboard and participation with assistive technology. Make sure that you use your text boxes, deriving from your ribbon. When you're using tables, we don't use merge cells. Merge cells, assistive technology does not read merge cells. It's very difficult for them to place it where it needs to be. So if you can develop your tables without using merge cells, that is a plus. If you have to use merge cells, my recommendation is to save it as an image and then put what you're trying to say in alternative text behind that particular table. All track changes must be accepted and the comments must be removed. Now, if you have a live document and you are using track changes and you're using comments, my recommendation is that in that email, you notify them that you have track changes on and comments in there. An individual who's using reasonable accommodation or assistive technology understands and knows how to uncheck track changes and move the comments to read your document and put them back without disturbing your format. So yes, if you do have track changes or a live document and everybody's working on it, make sure that you put it that the document is not 5-way compliant because it has track changes and comments in it. They know exactly how to handle that document once you let them know what's there. Watermarks are the same. If you have a watermark, draft, confidential, do not copy. Watermarks tends to take over the image of the wording of a page. So if you use that in behind your text, it comes back as an image. Again, if you're going to send it out, make sure you let them know that you have watermarks behind on your document. They know how to remove the watermarks, read it, and put the watermarks back so that they have access to it. In navigational aids, your table of contents and page number, all your in your navigation, anything with 5 pages or more needs to start having a table of contents with it, so that a person can easily access it. I'm a prime example. I did a document with a group and we did over 3,000 pages. We had an individual with a disability. We did not number the pages. The individual was had problems. We had to go, it took us about a week and a half to identify where the person was. I think he was on page 1,596. Had I numbered the page, I would have been able to assist that individual within 5 minutes. So it's very important that when you start getting 5 pages or longer, that you start to number your page and you have a table of contents. All URLs must link to an active website and must be hyperlinked with a fully qualified URL. A fully qualified URL is HTTP or HTTPS, and then you put the rest of the information there, and it must be active. Sometimes you may have a URL that is this long right here. If it's that long and you want to make sure that they get to it and it's much easier, my recommendation is to go and you want to edit the hyperlink up here. You will name it what it is. I named it employee personal page, but you leave the address of the URL alone. And these two are the same links. It's just that I made it shorter. This is the employee page and this is the employee personal page. Just make sure that when you do that, that is exactly what you want the individual to go to. So this is the employee page. I want them to know that they're going to employee personal page. So I made it shorter, I made it more clear, I made it more definite too, and allowing them to know exactly where they're going. and make sure all links are active. One of the things that I wanted to show you before we get here is that when you are doing a table of contents and you start making your headers 1, 2, and 3, one of the things that you can do to make it active is your reference. You want to go to table of contents and you want to insert. If you insert and you have done your headers in the right way, you can definitely go to, and it will take you definitely to where your headers are. The other thing that I want to say to you is that you do have the ability to check to see if you are making your documents 5-way compliant and accessible in Word. You can review and check your accessibility. It will tell you exactly what is wrong with your document while you are creating it. You have the ability to check it to see if it's keep accessibility checked. And what it does, it actually tells you which part is not done, what needs to be done, and how to fix it. Okay, the other thing I want to do for you right now is I want to take this over and save and change it over to a PDF to show you what you need to do as you go. Now, once you do this in Word, a lot of your characteristics will go over to a PDF. The one thing that I want to tell you about a PDF is that you still have to check. So what you want to do is go to accessibility, do your accessibility check, and start checking. It will tell you what your problems are within here. My recommendation is that when you convert your Word document to a PDF, rename it and save it so that when you're fixing it, that you're able to go back to it. PDF is not that friendly to you that if you make a mistake that you can fix it right then and there easily. So my recommendation is if you fix something and you know it's fixed, save it to a different name. And all you have to do if you made a mistake, back out of it, and then you're able to do it. And this piece right here, I want to make sure that you understand that this is right here is a manual check. It tells you your logical reading order, your title field, and your color contrast. We talked about color contrast. I looked at everything. I have a light background, dark lettering. If everything passed, you can go here and pass it. Now for your title, you need to go to File, Properties. You're not going to get this all at one time, but I just want to make sure that you are aware of it. You want to go to Description and you want to put in a title. I'm just going to put doc here. Your subject, you want to put doc here. You want to make sure whoever the author is, it is not the person's name, it's the organization, so that if a person is having a problem with it, they know exactly where to go to get some relief or some help to support. So it should be OCIO IMD, and then I know to go to OCIO IMD and not be looking for the individual to do that. The other thing what you would need to do is go to your initial view. Here we have a file name. What you want to do is do document name, and you want to make sure that you save that document with the exact title that you want them to do so that they're able to look it up and find it. The last thing that I want to show you is that here in this language, English, you have an ability to do different languages, but you want to make sure that you do English first. When you do an English document and you fix all the mistakes that you find over here in your accessibility checker, you can go and translate that document into different languages and it will take on the characteristics of English. But you have to get your English document done correct first before you change it over to another language. And so once you fix that, if I go back and do an accessibility check for this, you'll see that my title passed right here. And so for your logical reading order, in order to check your reading order, you will definitely have to go to your view and read out loud. You want to activate that read out loud. You want to view, and then you want to tell it what pages you want it to read. It will not read here. You won't hear it most likely here, but you can go back and check it for yourself on that. So any area that you don't understand or don't know how to fix, you have the ability to go out to a PDF and Adobe, and it will definitely explain it for you on what is the problem. It tells you exactly where to go to fix that problem. It gives you step by step on how to fix your problem to make it accessible for an individual. So with that being said, anybody have any questions? That is how you make your Word documents and your alternative formats for your documents to be 508 compliant and accessible, especially with individuals who have assistive technology. Do we have any questions on that?
No, but there is, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
There is a question in the chat that can this software check the website? There is a W3C that has a website checker. I've
Yes,
tried
there
to
is.
send a message in them. I can't, it won't let me chat, so I'm not quite sure what I'm doing wrong.
So you might have to use the URL to what, there are several tools that you can use. If you go out to WCAG 2.x and go out there and look at the authoring tools, they give you several tools that you can use to check your website to see if it's 508 compliant and accessible. Normally you would have to put the URL in there, and when you do the URL, make sure you have HTTP or HTTPS in there, because if you don't, it will not check it.
All right.
Let me answer. Why can't I answer my? I don't know how. I must know something wrong.
So we're running short on time. Angela, you have anything else that you need to do? I think we're getting pretty close.
Nope.
Adriano, there's another question.
Oh,
Okay.
I can answer the questions while we're there. Go ahead.
Can you see the question, Angela?
I cannot see the question. Let me go in here.
Will
And
the best practices document be available somewhere for reference?
I can provide this to Adriano, and he can send it out to y'all or provide it to y'all.
So I will speak to that. I saw that one. All right, so I want to make sure that we finish on time. Thank Angela, that is just outstanding. Now, y'all can see, everybody can see why we wanted to make sure that we had Angela here. And to that question, yes, the slides will be available. That'll show everything that Angela discussed. And if you have subsequent questions on that, please feel free to send them to us, and then we'll try to work as best we can to get those questions answered. So yeah, it'll be in the Files tab and the agenda items on the event side. So those slides will be on the Files tab in the agenda item on the event side. So with that, in light of the fact that we only have a few minutes, I think we saved 15 minutes at least for questions and answers. I'll just say in the summary that we've discussed the compliance review process. We gave you some training tools, some websites and the trainings for you to be able to provide the training that's required to enable compliance. We also talked about the communication resource plan and its connection to the LEP plan for the future when it comes out. We gave you information on the long versus short non-discrimination statement. It's an issue of space availability. So we have 5 minutes before we get off. And then wait, I got it. We got to get off in 5 minutes. We discussed the purpose of the and justice for all, and then we outlined the necessary steps for a successful compliance review. So I'll turn it over to the participants to see if they have any questions before we get booted off of you.
That's what I was trying to say. I was trying to answer the questions they submitted to USAEDC. But go
ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. We only got 5 minutes. Go ahead. Go ahead, Dolores.
Oh, there were some questions submitted to USAEDC. One of them was FAS USDA, please provide the training videos for civil rights. Please let us know how to access the training. That's the link that Adriano had, is in the presentation.
And that they'll get after the training.
Provide an outline of what documents are requested. Each time we go out to do a compliance review, there is a checklist that's provided to each of the recipients to let them know what is needed and what we will be looking at when we come on site. The next question, if cooperating employees manage USAA grant programs have completed civil rights training, how often must it be repeated? For us, we only require the training to be completed once. There are organizations that we found out that require their employees to complete it annual, biannual. That's at their discretion. Is there a plan to update current training modules? There is a plan to update current training modules, but that training is going through approval, and we have to wait for that. But hopefully sometime next year it will come out. And with that requirement, there'll be a change. All current employees must take the training, and all new employees will be required to take training within 30 days. And we will have you to sign the affirmation confirmation to provide that. Okay, the next question, for printed materials, we put an equal opportunity provider employer. How do we trust social media? It doesn't matter what platform that you are putting out the information. If you are announcing or publishing information regarding USDA or FAS, you must put that statement. This institution is equal opportunity employer. Deloitte is the equal opportunity providing employer, regardless whether you use USDA or your institution. It must be provided regardless which platform you use. That's all the questions I have from USDA. So we can go to the participants.
Yeah, thank you, Dolores. I just want to, we have about a few more minutes before we get kicked off. Rebecca, I'll turn it over to you to see if there's any other questions. If not, we'll conclude the training.
I haven't seen any others come in. If anybody does, you can raise your hand, I'm watching, or just unmute.
Okay. Seeing none, I want to thank all the participants and my team members in particular, and my team members for providing this training and helping me in making sure you get this information. And we just want to say thank you for listening. And if you need any questions from Civil Rights, just give us a call and we'll be more than happy to answer your questions. With that, Rebecca, I'll turn it back over to you.
That's it. We will see you at the next meeting. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.